Welcome to this month's panel, presented by the CrowdCentric Network, Startup Nation NYC, and Women Business Starters meetup groups. If you're not a member of one of these meetup groups, please join us so you're aware of future events. We try to hold an event every month. My name is Michael Hellman, co-founder of CrowdZoo.com, a crowdsourcing and crowdfunding marketplace. We will be launching the site out of preview in the next week or two. We'd like to thank New York Life Insurance Company for providing this beautiful space. Tonight's panel is going to focus on the startup creation process, from raising money, legal, accounting, trademark and copyright enforcement, all the way through retirement options. So we're going to start off tonight by introducing our esteemed panel. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alex. I work with a lot of tech startups, primarily function as a sleep CPA / business consultant.
I'm Matt Zucker. I'm a corporate attorney at Kelly Dryden Warren, and I focus on all areas of corporate law, helping companies grow. We do mergers and acquisitions, we do equity and debt financing, securities work, and basically everything from start to finish. As companies grow, we're there to help them.
Hi, my name is Amy Gavin. I'm a trademark and copyright attorney at Kelly Dryden Warren. I've helped a lot of startups over the years. The most important thing is your business name, right? So you want to make sure you have strong trademark rights, and I'm here to help you.
Hello, I'm John Asen. I'm an angel investor. I've done about 50 startups. I have 20 active right now. I typically invest about $100,000 initially and up to $500,000 over the life of the company, and I only accept one-page executive level summaries.
I am Kobla Samwa. I work with St. Nick's Alliance as a small business advisor based in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I counsel businesses anywhere from idea stage to newer businesses and help plug them into other resources like financing, certification for some minority women-owned businesses, and then help them with just general consulting.
My name is Albert Shakori. I'm a financial advisor. I have my own practice with New York Life. I mainly help people show them how to save money and many other things with products, life insurance, any investments.
You could hold on to the microphone and pass it. I'm going to start with Kobla. First question, what kind of businesses does your organization usually assist?
So there's no typical type. Historically, there were a lot of low-tech restaurants and local businesses.
Brick and mortars
and service providers that wanted to provide a local service. However, we've think through the work of my colleague BJ and I and Ernie Spears, who runs the center, been able to migrate up to a little more sophisticated businesses. But the trend based on where we are has been a lot of food businesses, so makers of, name your product, a pickle, a cake, or something like that. But just about every type of business comes in our doors. So we are versed in being able to kind of adjust to the issues of each.
So since you are a community nonprofit, can St. Nick's really provide assistance to tech startups as far as free advice? Why don't you talk a little bit about the level of assistance you could provide?
Right. So I would look at it as two ways. One is as a direct resource. BJ, I mentioned my colleague a second ago. He started a letter of credit business online startup, had 3 rounds of funding. So he's been in it. And, we have a diverse background, so we can directly help you at least with putting together a business plan, exec summary, a pitch deck kind of work. But more importantly, what I hope people look at is as a resource. So we have relationships with law firms, accounting firms, other people who, bankers, etc., that we can hopefully plug you into, get you prepared to talk to them, and then plug you into them. And that is the greater value. Being able to have a vetted accountant or lawyer or, name your resource is kind of our greatest value.
And what kind of funding sources can you help early on?
We focus mainly on the lending side. We have that is something that we actually help businesses pretty actively do. We focus mainly in the microloan space, so anywhere from a few $1,000s to about 30,000 is our sweet spot. We do that through a number of microlenders throughout New York City. However, we work on larger loans than that. You know, we're actually working on through NYBDC to help a business get upwards of $300,000. So we are able to assist on that front as well, but it's mainly on the lending side, less so equity investors.
Sure. Are there any grants or other alternative sources of funding that you guys can make available?
So I get that question a lot in terms of grants. People come in and they want free money, understandably. There's not a lot out there in terms of grants, so I wouldn't be looking for that necessarily to start your business. However, there are a lot of incentives if your business is going to involve hiring. There are a lot of incentives around real estate if you're going to take space. That might not directly look like a grant, but can definitely help you.
Okay. Legal and accounting costs can be pretty high for bootstrapping startups. Is there any assistance on that front that your organization can provide?
Yes, on two fronts. So one, we talk to service providers from legal to accounting, and they know, since they're working with someone from us, that they're going to give the nonprofit, pricing. So we try to make that less of a burden for businesses. And in some cases, we're able to, through some relationships, get businesses pro bono services. That all is on a case-by-case basis, and where the business is, and whether the pro bono provider is interested in taking them on. But that is another great resource, and I would definitely advise you to look into similar organizations like mine, because there's a wealth of resources there and potentially free services that you might be able to get, qualified services.
All right, Matt Zucker.
Yes.
So how early should startup founders or entrepreneurs create a legal entity for their business, and why is this important?
Just to give a background there, you don't need to create an entity to run a business. If you want to enter into a contract for services or create goods and sell them, there's nothing stopping you. Maybe you need to obtain a permit or whatnot. The benefit that by creating an entity that you get is you get protection from liability for liabilities of the company that you're starting, and a vehicle to bring on equity investors. So the question is really when is the right time to do that? So if you're still in the planning stages and you're not generating revenue yet and you haven't been entering into contracts, it probably doesn't make sense to invest the time and the money to create an entity. You're better spent investing in your business and growing your business. On the flip side, when you're at the point that you are generating revenue, that you are signing contracts, or you're trying to bring in some equity investors, that's the point when you should create an entity. And I think before that, really you just want to focus your time and energy on other matters. The other thing to consider is you don't want your brand to be stale, and you don't want to create this entity and have it out there kind of be hanging around until you're really ready to kind of pitch to the investors. That's just another thing to consider.
Great. So can you give us a quick rundown of the differences between a DBA for a sole practitioner or partnership, an LLC, and a C Corp?
Sure. The DBA is basically, it's going to be a local filing. And what it is just to use a name. So if you're Joe Smith and you want to run a, let's say computer repair business, you can either run it as Joe Smith and I'll fix your computers, or you can file a DBA and you can say Joe Smith Computer Repair. And it's not creating an entity, it's not limiting your liability in any way, but it is giving you kind of a nicer name to run your business. And similarly, if you're an entity and you want to, let's say, do 3 different lines of business, and you want to say, XYZ, just same example, XYZ computer repair, XYZ TV repair, XYZ phone repair, but you don't want to go through the cost and expense of forming new entities for each of those, you can file a DBA for each of those. And again, it's not going to create separate liability for each of those entities, but it'll allow you to kind of have a brand name that you can use. To form an entity and to create this kind of an entity to protect your liability and for equity investing and other tax and other issues, The two main vehicles used are the corporation and an LLC. Corporation has been around longer, is more well-known. For some investors, it's preferred because you're dealing with shares and you kind of know what you're getting. It does have more corporate formalities, annual shareholder meetings, keeping detailed records of minutes. And so for that reason, a lot of people tend to not want to do it, especially if you only have a handful of investors. And the LLC is another form of entity that you can use. The LLC is going to be a lot more formal. You don't have to have annual meetings. It also enables you to kind of contract around different ways to run the business. You know, one of the examples we say is that when you have a corporation, you basically have a bundle of sticks. And when you're a shareholder, you have that whole bundle. And with an LLC, you're able to kind of contract certain of those sticks. So you can say certain people are going to have more say over voting, and other people are going to have more interest in certain types of profits or liable for certain types of liabilities. And you don't have that flexibility with a corporation, which you do with an LLC. With the LLC, though, you know, it's a little, sometimes investors are a little less familiar with it. Sometimes because you're not dealing with different shares, can be more complex in terms of giving equity to employees. So, you know, it's one of those things where you really want to talk to somebody who's done this, you know, a legal advisor, somebody who's been through this that can kind of take a look at your business and see what makes the most sense.
Does the domicile, my company, make a difference? So I hear that it's recommended for startups to be incorporated in Delaware or Nevada, even if you're going to be a New York-based company. Why are we hearing this? And is it true?
So it is important where your domicile is. And where that's going to be, it's going to depend on a couple factors. The reason why a lot of people say Delaware is the place to be is if you're looking for venture capital funding, a lot of times investors want to see a Delaware company because they know Delaware laws. They know that the laws have been vetted, the Delaware courts are very sophisticated. People kind of know that if something's going to be ruled on under Delaware law, they have a better idea of how it's going to kind of flush out. They're also familiar with different protections and different preferential tax treatment that investors get under Delaware law. Similarly with Nevada, was mentioned, Nevada and Wyoming, some people look at there because they have very strong indemnification statutes that protect directors and officers. And other people who are very risk adverse, you know, maybe want to focus on that. I would say, though, it really depends on what type of business you have and what you really are looking for. For instance, if you're opening a restaurant in New York, you're going to be doing business in New York, you're going to be operating in New York under New York laws, and you know, most likely you're probably going to be bringing on investors directly. You're not going to be going through VC funding. You know, it's going to be more of a direct private placement investment there. In that situation, it's probably not worth forming in Delaware because you're going to be paying more fees to Delaware, and you're also going to have to pay fees to New York. And you're not really going to get too much of a benefit. I would think that the lawsuits you may face are not going to be super complex shareholder, you know, suits that you really want the benefit of the Delaware court for. So I think it's really, again, it's a question of you really have to look at what your business is, who your investors are going to be, to see whether it's worth paying the extra money to form in Delaware, you know, if you're going to be doing business in another state.
I wasn't planning on it, but John, can you just give your opinion for you as an investor, the importance of this, if it's important at all, and if so, why?
I have a strong preference for Delaware because we know the laws and their courts are very efficient. So you get quick resolutions. New Jersey has the same statutes as Delaware, but it hasn't been vetted in the court systems. So for example, I would not do a New Jersey company. I have a few New York and a few California companies, which is okay.
So you're not rigid that
No.
way? If something interests you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have no Nevada companies, never have seen a Nevada company yet.
So what is the difference between par and no par value shares?
So literally, it's a little bit of an archaic concept, but literally, the par value is going to be the minimum amount that you can sell a share of stock for, and the minimum amount of aggregate, you know, capital that you need to have in the company before you can pay out dividends or do a share repurchase. As a practical matter, where it comes into effect usually is a lot of states base their franchise tax based on the number of shares outstanding and the par value. So that's one of the reasons why, from a legal standpoint, we always recommend having a very small par value, just a fraction of a cent, just because if for a state, obviously if you want to pay out and you don't want to have that capital that you maintain with the company, you want it to be a low amount, and based on whatever your taxes are, your franchise taxes, you want it to be based on a low amount. There are some states, California for instance, that they don't look at the par value concept, but even when you're a California corporation, let's say, you don't know where the future is going to take you, and you may end up doing business in a state that does look at that. So I think it's always better to have just a very minuscule amount of par value, even if your home state isn't going to look at it, just so in the future you don't have an issue that comes up later.
So we're usually talking like 0.0001
Or even less.
or
sometimes.
even less, right? So in many cases, you have to pay a fee to the state to purchase shares or additional shares. So clearly, when you're dealing with such a small amount per share, that's how you can start your company off with, say, 1 million or 10 million shares,
Exactly.
and not really be paying out.
Exactly, and the franchise taxes too. Every year when they look at how much you have to pay for the right to be, let's say, a Delaware company, Delaware is going to look at the total number of shares outstanding. So if you have 10 million shares authorized, 8 million shares issued, let's say, and they're going to look at that times the par value is one measure they're going to use to determine what the franchise tax is.
Okay, so I have a few co-founders. What about equity? How do we automatically own equal shares in the company? Is there a need for a shareholder agreement between the co-founders?
It's a great topic here with the shareholder agreement, because it's one of the issues that comes up sometimes when you form a company and you follow the paperwork like you just said, just with New York. If you don't do anything else, you think you're there. But really, you haven't detailed who owns what the rights are, what the restrictions are between the founders and with the company. Generally, with formation documents, it's not going to say in the formation documents who the owners are and what their percentages are, because these are public documents, and people aren't going to you don't want to put that out there. So it's really important to have a shareholders agreement and to have initial resolutions, initial minutes that are going to say what everybody owns. If it's a corporation, how many shares, you have a stock ledger that says it. If it's an LLC, to have an operating agreement. But also with the shareholders agreement, what it's going to do is it's going to say for actions of the company, for things to happen, what do you need? Do you need a 51% vote? Do you need a 75% vote? In order for major things to happen, can the officers that you've appointed of the company or the directors make these decisions on their own, or do you need the shareholders to approve it? Especially with founders, when you're starting out, what if somebody wants to sell? Can they sell to anybody? Should the other founders have a right of first refusal, or a right to drag somebody along if you get an offer for the company that 5 founders want and to take and 1 doesn't? And these are all the things that it was really important to kind of sit down with an experienced attorney, with somebody who knows, who's been through this and can go through all these issues. You come also, just another real quick with founders, people might start with the company and then might want to leave. And so what happens with that? What if somebody starts and is not pulling their weight? Can the other active investors, active founders buy them out? How does that process work? And these are all issues that we deal with in the shareholders agreement, so that there's an agreement between the members, between the shareholders.
If we raise money from family and friends, do we have to give them equity, or is it better to treat it as a loan? And are there any SEC or IRS filing requirements for this, such as the dreaded Form D?
Well, just to take it from the start. So the equity debt is a great question, and it often comes down to the golden rule, which is whoever has the gold makes the rules. And it's what people are willing to take if they're going to give you money. I think it also depends on kind of how you see your business developing. If you have a business that you expect to generate revenue quickly, maybe it may make more sense to form it as debt, right? Because you can take on this debt, you're going to quickly make money, you can pay off the loan, and then have full equity in your company and not give it away. If it's going to take you a significant amount of time to raise money, it might be better to take on equity, because you take on equity and now you don't have this looming debt hanging out there. And especially if you're dealing with friends and family, you don't have your relative or close friend kind of with this debt they're hoping to get repaid and they don't know what's going on. It may be better to issue them some equity. It's money that's there. They kind of have a sense that it's more of a long-term investment. And if you're successful and you're making money, then they deserve to make some return on that. And having a successful company, it might not affect you as much. Another factor to consider is if you're giving equity to somebody who may be able to contribute to the business, it may also be better because if they have a skin in the game, they may be more willing to kind of introduce you to people, to help guide you, to provide some added benefit. But I don't think there's a bright line rule. It's really, I think a big question is going to be, when do you expect to bring in money? When could you pay it back versus, if it's a longer term investment? But it's really going to be a specific, depends on the business plan and the business model. So.
Okay. What if we raise money from a seed or angel investor as opposed to the family and friends? So now it's a stranger.
Gotcha. So yeah, I think then the goal to be even more applicable is, it's what are they looking for? But I think a lot of it's the same thing. A lot of it when you deal, and especially with my last point, is if you're dealing with an angel investor, somebody who's done this before, a serial investor, it may make sense to give them some equity so they have some skin in the game, so they can really have an interest in introducing people to growing the business. But on the flip side, they also may have stronger ideas than your friends and family might. And you may, if you're very passionate about your project and this is something your life's dream and not one of many projects you want to do, but this is your life's dream, maybe you want to be a little more wary about giving up equity, especially so early before you've really built up some value. And on the other side, if this is just one of 10 projects you want to get to, maybe you give up some equity, you kind of get people going, you build it up, and maybe you sell out even to the investors, so you never know.
So you've raised money.
Mm-hmm.
Now what about early employees? How can you give equity to these first employees? They're not partners, founders. What are the stock options? And would you recommend that you have a vesting schedule?
Sure. So stock options are a great tool to kind of incentivize employees and to compensate employees early on when you probably want to retain as much money and much capital as you can to grow the business. And it's a way that, especially if you have knowledgeable employees or employees that you explain this to, where they can, just to step back, what a stock option is it's a right for the employee to buy shares later at a price you've determined now. So you can give them what's called a strike price, or a price that they have to pay for the shares now, let's say 10 cents. And the hope is that if the shares are worth $10 later on, that's all profit for them. And it doesn't cost you anything now. You reserve a certain portion of the equity in your company to give out to employees. And it enables you to basically pay them now with paper that they can cash it later when there's actual money there. I think that the vesting schedules from a company perspective, which is we usually, although we advise investors on the other side when we're dealing with a lot of times with the company, and the vesting schedule helps make sure that you're not just handing options out, that you're actually getting value for it. So a lot of times what we'll see is for the first year, you have maybe what's called kind of like a cliff, and that somebody needs to be working for you for a year for these options to kind of kick in and go over this cliff. And so then you know that it's working out. You're not hiring someone who's not working out, and now you've given them equity and they're going to go off and have this forever. So after a year, you have a sense that this person's working out, there's somebody valuable to the company. And then typically you have a vesting schedule, so over, let's say, 4 years, the options will vest, so they keep working for you and they'll have this. And as the company grows, they'll have an added value too, and they can grow with it. And just in terms of the format, a lot of times a corporation is used because it's just very easy to, reserve shares, set up an option plan, stock option plan, and kind of have the employees come to that.
Can I ask a question? It's an interruption, but so if you set a strike price 4 years ahead, that carries through the 4 years of the vesting?
So typically, yes. So what you'll do is you'll issue, let's say, make up numbers, say 100 shares now at 10 cents a share, let's say, or 1,000 shares, whatever it is. And so that strike price is going to stay the same. But over 4 years, they'll vest more of those options. So if they would leave it only after 2 years, they would lose the options, half the options at that point. So.
Okay. What if one of the founders leaves the company within a year of the business, or even later on? What happens to his or her stake in the company?
So if there's this is what I was talking a little bit about before, if there's no shareholders agreement, they keep it. It's theirs. And they'll have the stake in the company. And if they leave after 6 months and the company's widely successful, they'll share in the success just like everybody else. And one of the things that we like to put in the shareholders agreement is a mechanism to make sure that, if everybody's on the same page, that there's a mechanism for making sure that they stick with the company. So, often, let's say in this situation, 1 year, you could have a 1-year vesting period where if somebody leaves within the first year, they forfeit their shares or they get bought out automatically for a set price. Another way to do it is just to have kind of either a buyout or some sort of mechanism where you can value the company at some later date, so that if you have 10 founders and one of them just isn't pulling their weight and whatever number you agree on, let's say if 9 of the 10 agree, you can buy out the 10th person, and there's a mechanism for doing that. You value the company, and we detail out how you do that. But you eliminate this issue where somebody, because they were there on day one, they are equal partners with everybody else if they're not pulling their weight. And another issue that comes up that we deal with in the shareholder agreements is intellectual property. Jamie will talk about more, I'm sure, in a little bit. But if somebody creates something, you really want to make sure that it's owned by the company and not them individually, because if somebody leaves, you don't want to have to negotiate at that point having it retained by the company. You want from day one, everybody agrees, everything developed by the company or contributed to the company is going to be owned by the company for shareholders.
So that's why I know a few companies like this that actually create a company that just owns the intellectual property of the company and then creates another entity that runs the day-to-day, and so something happens and they get sued, it's that company that's going down, but the company that owns all the intellectual property is safe.
Correct.
Because you keep agreements between the two.
Yeah, we're actually working with a client now that's rolling out retail stores, and it's a very similar structure that we have set up, and where you have the IP in one entity, you have the management in another entity, and then each retail store is another entity. And so we have separate investors for each store, and you have kind of the majority stake is this management group, and that's split up between the people running it, and then you can bring different investors in to each individual project, and it's just kind of roll it out, and it looks really good, and we've got a whole number of them planned.
Right. What if you have already incorporated your company? So you've started your business, you're starting to sell product or opened up your website, and you go to bring in investors, and the first thing you learn is that you made mistakes, many mistakes. Your company is set up wrong, you have not been taking care of your books, you incorporated in the wrong state. Can these mistakes be corrected later on?
So you've seen this once or twice.
Yeah.
It's a common issue that happens, especially with startups, because as an entrepreneur, you just want to get off the ground, you want to get things going, and it happens more often than not that things aren't done perfectly the first time, and that's where lawyers come in, and if finding somebody who's been through this, that knows how to do it, and you can sit down, and it's fairly easy to kind of get things right. The longer you wait, the harder it gets, and especially the more the company grows and the more value the company has, the harder it's going to be, because when the company is not worth a lot, it's easy to get people to agree to anything to get the company going. Once the company has value and there's money out there, it adds another level of complexity. So as soon as possible, I think it's always best to speak to somebody who knows how to do this, who knows how to do it, that can sit down and just make sure everything's structured right.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to Alex now. So we've just heard about the legal issues, that you have to consider, and the setup issues for a company. Now we're going to hear more from the accounting finance side. So, Alex, what are the tax filing requirements for startups or small business owners?
Sure. So really, if you're starting up, there's kind of two filing requirements that you kind of really have to think about. One is the entity filings. For example, if you choose to be an LLC, most LLCs by default are disregarded entities, which means that they kind of roll into your own Schedule C. There's no actual separate tax filing for them, unlike a S Corp or a C Corp. If you're an S Corp and C Corp, there's the 1120 and 1120S that separates you, and basically it's P&L for your actual business. But, kind of taking a step back, the second thing that you have to consider when kind of starting a business in terms of tax filing is, when they all mentioned it, is the state that you're filing in. So Delaware has, the annual franchise tax. So basically, if you incorporate in Delaware, but you operate outside of Delaware, Delaware, you don't really pay any state income tax or corporate tax. You just pay the annual franchise fee. But I kind of want to tap back into Delaware a little bit. I think the reason why a lot of people, lawyers and accountants, really like Delaware, because Delaware has the holding structure that allows it to somewhat be of a tax haven. Delaware in the past has been compared to kind of like the shady Cayman Islands. So what does that mean? So a lot of tech companies or companies that have very kind of high value intangible assets, patents, trademarks, whatnot. Typically what happens is the parent company forms a subsidiary company in Delaware which holds all the intangible assets. The reason why they do that is because Delaware, again, there's no kind of state tax that's being done on intangibles, right? So the parent company operating, let's say in New York, actually gets to make an agreement with the holding companies that said, well, I'm going to lease back all your intangibles. So they're paying a fee to their own subsidiary, and in which now decreases their tax obligation from let's say New York State side, right? So there's actually many states that are anti-Delaware. Pennsylvania, for example, actually just did, I think starting like 2014, they have this new rule out where they need to add back all the intangibles that you take out, intangible expenses that you take out of your P&L, because they find that as a loophole. Basically you're paying yourself and you're kind of decreasing the fees and limiting your tax liability. Whether or not this Delaware kind of structure is going to come into legal arguments more and more, I personally think so, but that's for you guys to kind of debate upon. Also, kind of if we talk about entity-wise and kind of state-wise, really another reason why tax filings kind of go into Delaware is that previously for a lot of other states there's no kind of incentive. But this is kind of a little bit off topic. Starting in 2014, I don't know if you guys heard, but Andrew Cuomo did this whole tax-free zone. So any company that falls into what they call like the high tech area, if you're able to partner with local colleges and really kind of establish academic institutions, you're able to actually have 100% tax-free. So no corporate tax, no state tax. Even the people that work for you have no income tax for a 10-year period. It's actually a new program called Startup New York. So, I recommend you guys to kind of Google it. It's a very incentivized way for New York to be competitive in terms of tax purposes. Basically, you can start the company in New York, or if you have a company operating outside of New York and you want it to kind of be, moved to New York, that applies as well. If you're expanding a subsidiary or operation in New York, that applies as well. But, there's a kind of a caveat to certain startups. Again, it's more based on high-tech companies, less so, I don't think if you're a restaurant or, typical kind of service-based businesses, you don't really fall into that category and don't have the tax incentives for that. And I diverge. So tax filings really depend on the entity and the state.
Continuing with what you're saying about Delaware company, so that means in New York you are treated as a foreign corporation.
Yep.
So tell them whatever they may need to know tax-wise. What does it cost them? Is it cost them more when you're treated as a foreign corporation?
So basically, I have clients that are incorporated, outside of New York, but they operate businesses in New York, and they have to collect sales tax in New York. So what's happening is that, for the purposes of New York, you need to have an application for authority to operate a business in New York, especially if you're in the function of selling anything and you have what they call kind of like a nexus in New York. So basically you have a sales office, you have a sales team, your main management is in New York, But it's also one of those things where as we come into more and more tech-based companies that are operating in like the cloud form and on servers, this kind of notion of whether or not they really need to have an application for authority in New York kind of differs and is coming to, I think, a little bit of argument in more recent days. I always kind of take a conservative approach. If you're doing business in New York, you have employees in New York, your management's in New York, you're negotiating deals in New York, you're operating in New York. You should actually apply for an application for authority to kind of function in New York.
Let's take a step back. So how important is accurate bookkeeping for your business? Can people use solutions like QuickBooks?
So let me say this, right? you guys don't do accurate bookkeeping, it all benefits me towards tax year end, right? Because you guys have all messed up records. I'm like, all right, I'm charging you per hour to fix this. What I say is that you should have accurate records. I mean, not only for yourself functioning as a business, but from really an IRS perspective, try not to mingle your funds. Perfect example. I have clients like this. There's checks, that should be made out to your LLC or S Corp or whatnots, right? But the checks are instead, your revenues are coming into your own personal name. Red flag, that's one of those things that eventually get you audited and get you in trouble. So I would say, yeah, take your time and just make sure your books are proper. I mean, one, for yourself, again, you need to know your own P&L, and how are you going to kind of distinguish what's your personal finances versus your business finances if you don't. And two, you're just going to, get yourself, it's costly for people, that come to me, and I have no qualms, charging, unlike, St. Nick, I have no kind of pro bono aspect to me. So.
Profit versus
Send
non-profit.
them to you, and then they get the shock anyways.
Let me just get your opinion on something, Matt.
Sure.
Mixing funds from personal and corporate, is that a situation where someone can use that to pierce your corporate veil for a lawsuit?
Yes, of course. When we're talking about forming an entity to protect yourself, it's not a home run. Just by forming the entity, you don't get that protection. And that you also have to comply with corporate formalities and make sure that there isn't this commingling. Because at the end of the day, you can't just form a corporation and use that to kind of put a nice face out there, but really it's just your personal piggy bank. Somebody's going to sue you, a court's going to look at that, and they're going to see right through it and say, no, this isn't an entity acting as its own legal entity, this is you, just with a mask on you. So it's really, really important not to commingle funds, and that's why if you form a corporation, to keep accurate, to keep annual meetings, to keep your minutes, to keep everything in order, because if the IRS is going to look, if somebody's going to sue you, they're going to look and they're going to say, who is this? Is this XYZ Corporation? Or is this really, Matt Zucker, and he's really just using XYZ so he can get the tax benefits? And it really does happen, and it's really important to kind of keep everything together. So.
Alex, do you recommend a business plan?
Sure. Let me kind of disclaim this. So I do business plans for a living, so I'm going to recommend yes. I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry. I love you, but I'm sorry. But, for the most part, I know John and I know a lot of angel investors, they don't need a business plan. All they really need is an executive summary, right? But I also work with venture capitalists. I also work with PE people. They need a business plan, right? It just depends on who you're working with. For example, if you're working with, ABL lenders, traditional lenders, people, again, PE, VC, family offices, certain types of institutions, they all want a business plan. I think, from an angel investor perspective, is really because they take on a lot more risk. So they're able to analyze a lot within that executive summary and within the pitch deck. But everyone needs a pitch deck first. That's kind of, the first and foremost, right? Before your business plan, you do need a pitch deck just to show someone. And, because again, no one wants to sit there reading like 30 pages of your life, in charts. So yes, you need a business plan, and come to me, so whatever.
Here's something a little bit more technical. What is the difference, since you brought up John, between seed or angel investors, venture capitalists, and PE firms? Because I have a feeling a lot of people have no clue.
Sure. For example, most seed investors typically are angel investors. There's very few, I think, maybe one or two actual VC firms that do seed funding. When I say seed, that means you're, most along the lines, you're pre-prototype, you're pre-revenues, you're definitely pre-EBITDA. But most VCs will look at you only after your past prototypes. For example, I know the people at Comcast and Roe Ventures quite well. All post-prototype. So you need something functional, demoable, viewable for them to pay attention to even look at you and get you in the door, right? The idea of, you have this great concept, give me like $500,000 to build this awesome, application, that doesn't happen. Really, from a VC perspective, it's really what they call kind of, later stage, early stage. They have a division, early stage, later stage VCs and whatnot. PE, in truth, is completely a different animal because PE, there's no concept of if you're earning less than 10 million EBITDA that they'll even take a look at you. That's just how most PEs are, right? Most PEs kind of function along the lines of you're in a middle market business or you're in a distressed business or opportunistic, type buyout scenario, and they're going to provide you funding for it, right? Because there's probably ample room for them to come, revamp the management, do growth. So if you're kind of in a startup, just kind of take that out of your mind altogether. Just don't even think about it. There's kind of like another concept of funding that along the lines of angels and individual investors or ultra high net worth, what we call the family office. What's an example of the family office? The Rockefeller family or the, Richard Branson family. They all have investment arms and investment companies that they form just to seek out either investments in other kind of funds or direct investments. So I think those are kind of like the spectrum of investing and financing. So just in case, you guys are wondering, I came from Credit Suisse, so that's, I'm not just kind of like blowing smoke. I'm actually telling you the truth of how this works.
Family offices is one of those things that the average person knows nothing about. And even the name family office does not tell you what it's about. And there's a reason. They don't really want the average person to understand what it's about. But basically, as she said, it's high wealth families that form investment organizations to seek out investments. And it is not that easy for the average person to even find out who these companies are or where they exist.
I did want to mention there is that one type of EB-5. I kind of bring this up because I have clients currently going through the EB-5 process. So EB-5 funding is actually what's happening is that there's a lot of foreign rich individuals that want to put money into the U.S. One, because they want to get some of their money out of, kind of questionable countries to just protect themselves. So the concept of EB-5 is now coming into play and is kind of in full view. Everyone talks about it, and I deal with it for a couple of my clients. So what it is that the U.S. government encourages foreign investors to put money into the U.S. If a foreign investor puts either $500,000 into what they call an economic depressed area or $1 million into non-economic depressed companies, the foreigner is able to get a permanent residency card. So a lot of people like that. And then a lot of people, there's funds out there formed just for the purposes of collecting EB-5 funding. There's a lot of projects out there that are seeking that, but you have to fall into specific criteria. So for every $1 million that you collect from an investor, that actual company has to create 10 jobs. So most high-tech companies are not going to fall into that category unless we're talking about there's heavy kind of manufacturing aspect to it. So that's kind of also, if people want to learn a little bit more about that, feel free. We get approached by individuals, we get approached by regional centers, we get approached by many people from a financing perspective all the time. What seems to have a lot more traction is the EB-5 aspect, just because if you're a startup, it's really, really hard out there. Again, besides, having John, write you a personal check, right? So, yeah. So that's it.
And how important is an exit strategy?
Huge. No one wants to put money into you if you can't, somehow exit. Like, John doesn't want to stay with you for like 30 years, and just watch you grow. I don't want to stay with you for 30. I don't want to stay with you for 5. I'm looking for like an exit within like 3, give me a break, So it's all about ROIs and leaving, making sure that there's kind of like a market to sell you off to if you're a startup.
And so with the idea you create, you clearly want to also spend time thinking who will be interested in this and where will we go with it.
Yeah. But again, I think the time horizons are all very different. So most PE and VC firms, they're looking at like a time horizon of 5, maybe 7, kind of on the top range. This is because most funds operate on a 10-year span, right? So, basically most funds operate, they get institutions or wealthy individuals to kind of put money into the fund, and they're kind of on a 10-year span. But they're really looking for an exit within like a 5 or 7-year period. Most individual investors, what is your time horizon, John?
5 to 7, but it's more like 10 to 12.
It's what he wants and what he gets, right?
Sean will stay with you a lot longer. Now, here's the interesting thing. Most family offices, when they get into investing actually in you, if you're one of the lucky few, because it's really kind of family generational money, their time horizon is almost not there. If they want to stay with you for 15 years, so be it. It's a little bit different. Some of them, they're looking for really longer term partners rather than kind of like the short term exit. Again, because it's their own money, there's no one to kind of report to. Just like John is flexible with his, most family offices, have very, very wide ranges of time horizons.
Right. Okay, well, let's move on to Mr. Asen. So, John, big question. What do you look for in a startup?
Before I answer that, let me just say, when you approach an angel, you need to do some work and understand where the angel is coming from, some of his background and so forth. And so let me give a little background on me. I came out of Bell Laboratories, spent 25 years there, did bleeding edge technology work, then did marketing and business management for systems sold to international telephone companies, overseas companies. Because of my technology background, the two companies I'm most famous for funding are Diapers.com and Bikini.com. With Diapers.com, people used to make fun of me because I sold diapers on the internet. Well, we sold the company for $545 million to Amazon, and those people aren't laughing at me anymore. And Bikini.com, this company does exactly what you think it does. I invested in this company that's going through my midlife crisis, and I'm the Chief Quality Assurance Officer. Okay, so now the question is, what do I look for in a company? First of all, I want to see the possibility of me getting 10 times my return of my original investment. And the reason for that is 60% of the investments I do die completely, or they're zero. 30% become lifestyle companies where there's money coming in to survive, the company survives, but I'm not getting anything. We actually insert a put option to prevent that by having the ability to sell our stock back to the founders for our original investment plus an interest rate. And only 10% of the companies I fund succeed, big time. So the one company that succeeds must do at least 10 times for me just to break even. So I'm looking for 10, 20 baggage, but it's that one company that supports all of this. I then look for quality people. Can the people execute? Can they operate? And by execute, can you make decisions quickly? That's the most important part. I want you to be able to make decisions quickly within half an hour, with minimal or no data. I don't want you saying, well, should we get into this market or do this, and then spend 6 weeks or 6 months gathering all the data, doing all the analysis, then coming back with the perfect answer. I want quick, good decisions. If you make a mistake, fine, we recover, continue. So speed of execution, speed of decision making is important. What I look for in an executive summary, the first thing I look for, I want exactly what you're doing articulated. And by that I mean I don't want to see something, I enable my customers to do this, I support this, I encourage this. I want to know exactly what you're doing. 30 to 40% of the stuff I get does not have a statement of explicitly what the company is doing. Those I immediately flush. And then I want to know, explain to me the rationale for your market sizing. I don't want discounted cash flows because you're always dividing by zero and it doesn't make any sense. Tell me why you think this market exists, why you're disrupting this market, what the market will look. So I'm looking for the rationale. Then I want stuff that would impress me. Does your company have any revenues, traction, customers, whatever? If you don't have that, tell me something interesting and impressive about you. Were you valedictorian? Did you swim the English Channel? If you tell me you're going to sell diapers on the internet and you're not impressive, you're not going to get very far. Okay? So those are things I look for. It's got to be within a page. It also has to be aesthetically pleasing. If it's not aesthetically pleasing, it gets flushed away. I spend 1 minute per executive level summary. I get 3,000 a year come into me. So I spend 10 a day, so I spend 10 minutes a day going through executive level summaries.
So you partially stepped on almost every question I have.
No, I'm
But I am sure they want more details. So
Sure.
what is more important to you? One or the other or both? The founding team, which
Okay.
clearly you just made
Right.
that clear, or the idea execution?
Okay, my first, let's say, 20 companies, I focused on the big idea. And because I came from Bell Laboratories, I thought I could make everybody a good manager. I found out that was completely wrong and learned a lot of humility. So instead of my last, let's say, 20 or 30, I focused on the people with decent to good ideas by finding that people who are quality people really are much more successful than mediocre people with great ideas. And right now, in my initial 20, the most I ever had at one time was like 3 to 6. I now have over 20 companies. I'm able to manage it because the people are doing a good job.
So are you only a passive investor, or do you get hands-on with some of your companies?
Okay, I'm typically sort of passive, with the exception, of course, of Bikini.com, where I'm hands-on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on an as-needed basis.
They have to ask you to leave, right? What is the earliest stage at which you may decide to invest in a startup?
Earliest is napkin stage. If you can have a napkin and you can draw something on it, you're fundable.
Okay.
And I've done that with a toy
So
company.
you like this person, you know this person, you like him, and you're thinking in your head, I'd like to work with this guy. And he
That's right.
outlines for you on a napkin some idea he has, and you're thinking, it's as good as the last 2 months of 10 minutes a day if I read. So you're saying that's enough for you,
Yeah.
the combination.
That's as good as Alex's business plans.
Oh, but don't let him fool you. There's a whole bunch of due diligence that goes on. Yeah, your napkin goes through the ringer.
It's a towel by the time it's done. What is the latest stage you get involved?
I'll do stuff with some revenues and so forth, but I don't like that. But usually if VCs are involved, I don't like to invest because I don't get along with VCs. They're basically.
I think VC always say that they don't like seed or angel investors.
That's
and-
correct. It's your angel is aligned with the entrepreneurs and is not aligned with the VCs. So when the VC comes into fund, they're going to talk to the founders, entrepreneurs, and they'll just ignore the angels.
Right. They would love for you to go away or get paid off early on, or, you know.
Right. Yeah, VCs treat angels like cockroaches, something to be stepped on and squished.
Right.
Okay.
So clearly you're counting on this good relationship with the founders who you help get off the ground, that they're going to be looking out for your interests
Well,
also.
yes, and also, but the typical exit is a merger or a buyout. Getting a VC funding is quite rare. Because of my reputation, it's increasing, but it's no more than 15-20% in my case. So 80% of the stuff gets merged out or bought up before a VC gets involved.
I just wanted to ask you, the next step after you read an executive summary, the process.
Okay. If I like it, I'll send an email to the person saying, let's have a meeting. And so it's a meeting. It's a face-to-face is the next step. That's when the due diligence begins. And what I'm doing is I'm judging the person. I'm not doing due diligence on the product or service. Okay, so if you're talking to an angel, there's 3 things you want to do in an executive summary or in a meeting or an elevator pitch. The first is to entertain. The second is to impress. And the third is to inform, in that order. Most people think you need to inform. Talk about all the features in your program, the capabilities and all that. I don't even look at that. I assume it does what you tell me it does. I reject most companies prior to getting any due diligence on the product or service.
Do you invest in brick and mortar businesses or any non-web business startups?
The answer is yes, although every company has a web page, so people assume they're a website. I have a toy company which makes no use of the web. I have a poster company which has a massive warehouse, 300,000 SKUs, millions upon millions of posters. They don't really do anything on the web. They're a B2B type company, so yes, I do, but it's got that potential to get big.
So-
And it's hard to find those types.
Is it typical of most angels? It's just those few that fit in the potential of huge growth?
That's right. If you're an angel, you're looking for high growth potential companies. Brick and mortar typically do not fit into that.
So unless you're looking to build out a Home Depot concept or something, otherwise,
And even then, because of the high capital resources, you're probably not interested in that. It's more of a VC than private equity
right,
type
because
deal.
the amount of money. So why don't you just give us a range of what seed and angel investors put up for something that they really like, and then where does VC kick in?
Okay, typically, the national average for an angel round right now is 650,000. Until about 4 years ago, it used to be 275,000. And my averages track the national averages very closely. VCs typically will come in at the 2 million and up range. This excludes the micro VCs, which I've talked about, which will be funding along with angels, and they'll typically fund themselves about 250 to 350 per round, and that's the reason the average has gone up to 650. Is the micro VCs are active in the early stage world.
Most VCs actually start at 2 million. Some
Yeah.
don't even look at you at under 2 million because you need to have enough substantial revenue,
Valuation.
valuation for them to even look at you.
And private equity, you're talking minimum 10, 20, 50 million. They're way up there. They're actually buying businesses, they're buying majority control of businesses in many cases. They're long-term investors.
And maybe putting in their own management, and
Mhm.
so that could be potentially the end of the road for you
Right.
as a founder, and it's your payday, and it's your early stage investors' payday.
That's right.
What are absolute deal killers for you?
A sloppy executive summary, not describing what your product does, not being sociable, being an a-hole, things like that, are just surprising you. You see a lot of people like that. Okay.
If you like an idea and you put in $200,000, that's all they need to get started. Things are going well, you like the way things are going, will you continue to invest? Will you put more in?
I typically start out with about 100,000, go up to about 500,000. So on subsequent rounds, when the initial angels reinvest, that's a very big positive sign to other angels. If the existing angels do not invest, that'll scare off most other angels for subsequent rounds. So that's viewed very positively by other angels and by the company. And I typically, if the company's doing well, I will invest again.
John, do you like to be the lead investor, or do you typically kind of go, with the syndicate?
I used to like being the lead angel, and I was about 50% for my first 20 companies, and that turned out to be a lot of work and so forth. So I do not like to be lead angel right now. I got too many companies going on.
Leads into a question I have, which is, so if you come into a company and say you're the second one in, and you like it, will you bring in other angels because they need $500,000? You look at the company, you say, I like it, I don't want to put in the $500,000, I'll give you
Yeah.
$200,000, but will you then contact friends
Yeah,
or?
I'll contact my network and try to get additional money,
Right.
sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Right. So that's the thing. So the seed or angel investors, that's why they're called angels, because they're on so early, that helps get the company launched, and a good relationship when they come to you and say, hey, John, I got another idea. You don't even need the napkin,
That's right.
you just,
Free napkin.
Just the
right, exactly,
Just the
exactly, free napkin,
napkin.
right. So the point is, you become friends with, the angels, and you may continue 2 or 3 companies together. What is your take on NDAs, non-disclosure agreements?
I don't sign them. I will not consider a company with an NDA. And if a company comes in asking for an NDA, I will not consider that company for investment, period. The reason for that is the following. Your executive summary and business plan should not contain, quote, any proprietary information. It's the business that I'm interested in investing in, not your, quote, proprietary idea. If you got a special chemical formula for doing something, I'm not interested in looking at that. I'm not actually looking at your product or service. I'm seeing if there's a business. Because I get $3,000 a year if you come in, if I sign an NDA, I have a legal responsibility to keep track of what I'm doing on subsequent things to show that I did not violate this NDA. The administrative aspects of this are much too great for me to do. So I don't do it. Most VCs don't do it. And also the culture of somebody asking for an NDA is, how'd you say, not pleasant for me. Let me give you an example. When a company comes to me and is doing something, I ask them, who are your strategic competitors? List 4 or 5. Then I tell them, send them your business plan. A lot of people freak out at that, especially people who want NDAs, okay? And the reason for this is the people who are the most likely to buy you out are your strategic competitors. They're in your marketplace, they understand the value you're creating, they understand you. So those, I'm getting it set up for a buyout or a merger. In my 17 years of angel investing, I've never had that backfire. Never had the case of the big strategic competitor stealing the idea or whatever. That just doesn't occur. Okay, so that's my take on NDAs.
Right. So startups, especially, there's few very unique ideas. So startups are coming into an industry and they're looking to disrupt it.
Yeah, let me give you a real example. Ex Libris was an internet book publisher and still is. And when we started the company in 1996, we were by far the first in the market. So this was suggested by the founders. They did their business plan, then they sent it to quote their strategic competitors. And there's one of the strategic, which was Amazon, not Google at the time, Yahoo, and all the main publishers, Simon Schuster, Random House, and so forth. So they suggested, let's send it to all the publishers. And I kind of freaked out at that, and this was my first experience with that. It turned out that we used the term dinosaur publishing industry in our business plan. And we sent that to all the publishers. Random House came back and gave us a very big investment. And the reason is they wanted to see if we were going to put them out of business, they wanted to be the first to know. Okay?
That's interesting. How do you view valuation?
I don't do valuations, I back into it. Can't do discounted cash flow. You're dealing with numbers that are just completely made up, okay? So what I do is I say, for the round that you raise, the complete round, that's the complete angel round, which averages, let's say, 650, you give up 20 to 30% equity in the company. I don't want the founders giving up more than 30%. If there's investors with me who want to get 40% of the company, I'm going to walk away. So I do never invest in a company where the founders give up more than 30% equity in the company. And the reason for that is on subsequent fundings, I'm going to get crushed. If VC invests or subsequent angels, they're going to crush the original angels because the founders are getting diluted too much. And the interest of the VC is to make sure the founders are whole, to make sure so they give them options or they'll make good with the founders. And so max 30, 20% minimum, because under 20% it's not of interest. So if you raise $1 million, you're worth $5 million. You raise 200,000, you're worth $1 million. And also if you come to me and say you're worth $5 million, that's okay. You raise $1 million, you come back, hey, I can only do 500,000. Well, guess what? You're worth 2.5. And it's a pleasant discussion. It's not a contentious discussion saying, well, your management team's not strong enough, your ideas, it's not contentious. So I back into valuations. The way I found it is after about 8 years, I got access to a large number of angel deals. The data, 90% fell within that range. So I just made it a rule. And I just stick to it right now.
So how does an entrepreneur or startup founder who maybe even has just launched their website, but they did it on a shoestring working at home, how do they meet angels like you? Where do you hang out?
Okay. Let me say a secret about angels. They're like cockroaches. If you find one, you're bound to find others, okay? Okay, so basically, people find me through the internet. I'm very visible.
Your website.
I do a lot of lectures at universities. For example, I do NYU, I do NJIT, Wharton, and I'm also doing University of Nottingham. Don't ask why, but it's an interesting one. I go to all the fairs, I speak a lot, I write, so people are able to find me. And they're able to find me at the tune of $3,000 a year. So they have no trouble finding me.
I've seen John like 5 times now, so I'm getting, real tired of you.
But I don't think I would characterize your availability out there with other seed and angel investors. Are there certain organizations people should be trying to join? Certain events they should be attending?
Yeah, well, events you should join, like the Entrepreneur Roundtable, once a month freebie event. You'll have some presentations. You have company presentations. That's a good event. A lot of these angel fairs are quite good. And there's 1 or 2 a week meetups. So there's a lot of places. You should not have a problem finding investors. I don't think it should be a problem.
Are you familiar with Angel.co?
Yes.
AngelList. Tell us what
AngelList.
you think about AngelList and do you participate?
Yes, it's been a godsend to me. AngelList, I got involved, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago, somewhere in that time frame. And prior to AngelList, I would do 1 to 1.5 companies per year. Finding a company was very difficult, time-consuming. Once I found the company, then assembling the angels, the syndicate, to fund the company was also very difficult. So it was a lot of work to get a company funded. With AngelList, at that time frame, I went through every single one. I spent a day. They had 3,400 companies. So I went through every single one and read them one day just to get the flavor for what was going on. And all of a sudden, I was surrounded by great companies. All of a sudden, I went from a desert to the jungle. So finding companies no longer became an issue for me. I then found out that I no longer had to syndicate. So because AngelList is the social network for entrepreneurs and angels. If I follow a company, anything that happens to that company, I get notified. People can follow me. So anything that happens to any of the companies I'm following or anything happens to me, any updates, they find out. So I found out that to be the best syndicator of angels and VCs. So all of a sudden I was no longer syndicating companies. It's a social network, but it's actually less social for me. Prior to AngelList, I knew every investor who invested with me very intimately. I don't know most of the investors who invest with me now. Okay, I was doing a talk in Mexico City, and a guy on the panel, said, "Oh, John, you're an investor in my company." And I go, "Yeah?" And he mentioned the We Hostels. "Yeah, oh yeah, that's right, we're investors." That's happened like 4 or 5 times now. So I don't know the people other than through email or reputation on most of the investors who invest in the companies. Since AngelList, I had 1 year where I did 9, which was a record, did 5 before, and I'm averaging 5+ per year because of AngelList. Right now, they have about 100,000 companies and almost 20,000 VCs and investors, angels. So if you want to get funding, get on AngelList and get somebody to follow you. Of the 9 companies in that 1 year, 7 were funded on AngelList. All of them got funded. 2 of them went through the roof in terms of numbers, close to around $2 million each. They were not looking for $2 million. So AngelList is a godsend.
AngelList.com?
No.
Angel.co.
So it's also AngelList.com will also work.
Right.
So to raise money on AngelList, you have to be a Delaware corporation.
Yes, they have that stipulation.
No, that's why they're all Delaware.
Right. That's why we did such an emphasis on that. Would you ever recommend that anyone ever hire someone to introduce them to investors as opposed to just attending meetups or attending events like this?
I have never invested in a company that was represented by a finder. So I invest in the people, not the finder. And in the early seed stage world, the companies can't afford a finder. So basically, I don't deal with finders. That's an area that's very unscrupulous, so you need to verify the people there, get references, and talk to the people they represent.
Do you like or personally attend pitch events?
Yes, I try as many as I can. especially demo days. The accelerator demo days are really super. If you ever get a chance, go to an accelerator demo day. 500 startups last year, they brought in 23 companies doing 3-minute pitches. It's awesome. ERA, which I'm an investor in, they do 10, and each gets 5 minutes. This is what you have to hone, that type of presentation.
I had a question for John. When you're raising an angel round, how do you feel about a founding team taking some of that money and using it to pay themselves a salary? And if you are open to that, what's a reasonable amount that shows you that they're serious about their business?
Yeah, I'm open to salary. I want the founders to be happy. So if they're not happy, they're not going to work. So the typical conversation is, well, how much money do you need to survive? So it's got to be below market. I'm not going to invest in a startup where the founder wants $250,000 a year because that's what he can get at Deloitte. Right. That's a no-brainer. Shares for founders, do not have equal shares for, let's say, if there's 2 founders or 3 founders. That causes gridlock in the company. Most angels will not invest in a company where you have founders have equal number of shares. Too much gridlock, there's other problems come in. So if you have to fire people and there's 2 equal founders, you could be out of luck, okay?
I have a question for John. Do you invest in companies where one founder live here in New York and the other one live overseas? Let's say in France, for example.
Yes, I have a Buenos Aires. Yes, that's okay. We're friendly. We're okay.
It's becoming very global, especially web businesses. Our business, there's 3 founders. 2 of us are in the U.S. and one of them's in Poland, and he's our CTO. So it's just becoming a very global thing now, and it just doesn't matter.
The distributor is like, how long should your money last you?
So if you're taking a $500,000 from you, how long do you want to see that's going to last?
Minimum 12 months, up to 18 months. If you fund something for 12 months, you can do 6 months of real work and then 6 months of trying to get the next round. So you allocate 6 months for your next round. If you raise much more than you wanted and you could run for, let's say, 36 months, we would prefer you do more within the 18 months if possible. So the more money, the faster you should run. 12 to 18 months is what we like.
Okay, we're going to move on to Amy. How important is a trademark to your brand?
Right. So your trademark is your brand. It's the source identifier. It's the thing that your consumers are going to see. A lot of times with startups, people don't think to clear their trademark first. So the most important thing is when you're going to name your company is to conduct a trademark search. Is there another company out there using the same or what would be considered a confusingly similar name? Sometimes with startups, what we have is somebody's invested some money, they launched a website, and they didn't clear their trademark, and all of a sudden they get a cease and desist letter from another company doing something very similar. And now you've lost your money because it's considered a trademark infringement. You have to change your name. So I think the most important thing for you to do first and foremost would be to clear your trademark name, know how strong your trademark rights are, and then from there, you might want to look into registering your mark.
What is the difference, for those who don't know, between trademarks, copyrights, and patents?
This is a question I get very often. So a trademark is your source identifier. It's your brand. Think McDonald's, Pepsi, Coke, right? You look at it, you pick up the product, you know who manufactured and who's selling the product. Copyright is the protection of an idea. It's not a source identifier. And so what would be copyrightable material are things like films, scripts, books, things of that nature. So it's not protecting the actual idea itself, which I think is important. So you have, how many films do we know that are mob related or about the mafia? So if you write a screenplay about the mob, you can't stop others from doing it. What the law looks at is whether or not they're similar.
Right. And patents are inventions.
Right. Patents protect inventions, right. And what that does is a patent gives you the right to stop others from producing, selling, importing a product that is similar to yours.
What happens if you own a domain name, but someone else owns the copyright to it, or vice versa?
Okay. So domain names are separate from trademarks and copyrights, and it's hard to have a third party be forced to transfer a domain name. So, for example, you can own
early on in the 90s, people were buying up like Coca-Cola.com and things
Right,
like
that's
that.
what I was just going to say. I was actually just going to give a Coca-Cola example. So you could own ilovecoca-cola.com, and it could be a fan site about how much you love Coke products. And it would be difficult for Coke to get you to transfer that because you have a genuine interest in the domain. You're not passing off that you're selling Coke products. Just because you own a trademark does not mean you can force somebody to transfer a domain name to you. And domain name proceedings are filed through the World Intellectual Property Office. And what happens is you file a complaint and you say, we want this domain name transferred to me because I own a trademark. And they'll look to see whether or not the owner of the domain registered it in bad faith. If there's no bad faith, you are not going to get a transfer.
Explain to us what exactly is work for hire.
So a work for hire agreement is very important for startups because what it's doing is it's protecting your IP. If you are hiring somebody to do a web design, or if you're a fashion designer and you're hiring somebody to help do textile prints, you want to have a work for hire agreement which says all work performed pursuant to the terms of this agreement belong to the company and not to the employee or the independent contractor. It's really important when you hire an independent contractor that you have an agreement, because let's say you are developing a web software program and you hire somebody to help you design the code and build it, and they're just an independent contractor, they're not an employee, they walk away, now there's no agreement, copyright law does not automatically grant you full copyright. So a work for hire agreement is very, very important. And a lot of times with startups, I hear from people, well, this is my cousin or my college roommate's cousin, and I don't think an agreement is necessary because we'll never fight, and you always fight. So a work for hire agreement is so important, and don't worry about offending somebody by asking them for an agreement because this is your product.
What do you think are the biggest trademark considerations for early stage startups?
Well, I already touched on clearing your mark. You want to make sure that there's not somebody else out there using your mark. Another thing to really consider is adopting a mark that is strong. If you're opening a restaurant in Brooklyn and you're going to call it the Brooklyn Diner, guess how many other restaurants out there are called Brooklyn Diner? You're not going to be able to enforce your rights against somebody else. So you really want to adopt a mark that's strong. Google was an arbitrary term. It was something that they made up, and think about how strong their trademark rights are now. It's something to consider. Be creative with your marks. I know a lot of times startups want to adopt a mark that will convey to the consumers what they're trying to sell. Diapers.com. Diapers.com, when it started out, was not a strong trademark. Now it's wildly successful. It's established secondary meaning within the marketplace. If somebody else tried to use Diapers.com, they have a very strong trademark claim.
Should you or can you trademark a tagline?
Yes. So taglines or slogans are really, you can obtain a federal trademark registration for them. They're really only protectable when they are used in connection with the sale and promotion of the goods or services. So, for example, just do it on Nike. You see it everywhere, so you could use that. But if it's just on a t-shirt and it's an ornamental use, not really used in connection with the goods or services, you would not be able to protect that. If you can, put it on a hang tag, put it on your website right under your logo, put the tagline. And one thing that's worth noting is use of the TM symbol versus use of the R symbol. The TM symbol you can use without a trademark application. It's just putting people on notice that you claim common law rights in the mark. You cannot use the registration symbol until you've actually obtained a federal trademark registration, not just filed the application, but actually obtained the registration. And the Patent and Trademark Office will not issue a trademark registration to you until you've demonstrated that the mark is in use in commerce. Service mark is the same as a TM, so you could use the SM at any time, and a service mark is for services as opposed to goods.
How can you protect intellectual property?
So if it's a copyright, you would file a copyright application with the Copyright Office, copyright.gov, and you can do that online, and it's actually, the fee to file, I think the Copyright Office fee is only $35. So you would want to, if you have something that's copyrightable, file the application with the Copyright Office within 90 days of your first publication of the work, which means that you start showing it to people, because that would give you access to certain statutory damages if there's an infringement. If you have a copyrightable work and you start showing it to people, and a year later you go and file a copyright registration, you don't get those statutory damages. So you want to do it soon.
What about things like code and less tangible things?
Code would be a copyright application, yes.
Okay.
And the Copyright Office won't compare they just look at what you're submitting to see if it's copyrightable. They're not actually comparing it to others to see if you're infringing. That sometimes can end up in litigation, but just because the Copyright Office gives you a registration doesn't mean that you're not infringing on another person's work.
Startup founders, especially people who are serial founders, they're risk takers by nature. More startups fail than succeed. So Albert, tell us how someone under these conditions can prepare for a retirement, and what kind of savings methods do you recommend?
Well, especially for startup companies, just to give you a little bit about my background, I deal with a lot of different type of companies, a lot of different type of people, whether they're family members or business owners, big corporations, benefits, whatever it is. My personal advice, if you're a startup company, try to keep your cash liquid. Your normal idea of savings is, you're throwing money in your IRA, your 401k, anything you're able to write off, but that money is not very liquid to you. It's only going to be liquid with a bunch of penalties.
So without automated payroll deductions, because you're a small startup, the startup founder, how does he set aside funds for retirement? What are the instruments?
So there's several different instruments you guys can utilize. Of course, at the end of the day, it all depends on your age, where you are in life, and you want to be liquid with the money. A lot of people use life insurance as a savings vehicle because of the tax benefits within life insurance, and not a lot of people are very familiar with cash value life insurance. What is cash value life insurance? It's two types of insurance. There's term insurance, there's a whole life insurance. It's a permanent insurance. It actually has a savings bank in that policy where you're able to save money, it grows, you're able to access that money tax-free.
And we're actually now going to open up the floor
Yes.
to any questions that you have at all.
Quick question on the trade secrets relative to patents in regards to securing your code or any of other elements of a company as a trade secret. How do you feel about that? I know it's a complicated procedure, but it seems that disclosing of source code and other elements within the original patent filing could be elusive to retaining your value of your secret or and it's a limited time patents. I was just wondering what you felt about someone brought up the difference of patents and copyrights.
Well, I'm not a patent lawyer, so, but, my firm does do a lot of patent work, and I think I know that the filing procedure is designed so that it's not disclosing any confidential trade secret information to the public, but that's really all I can tell you on that, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, okay, thank you.
If it's a trade secret, it should stay a trade secret. You shouldn't worry about patents.
That's
And
right.
none of my companies ever patented software.
Yes.
Hi, really quick question about patents, Amy, and probably for John, and probably for Alex as well, because your fintech background. When you develop software, as we do, you run the risk of treading on other people's patents. What economical steps can you take and make sure that you're not laying yourself open to a big lawsuit by unintentionally infringing on someone else's patent?
We generally don't worry about that. We'll let those people find us, and we'll probably find prior art anyway, so we're not concerned about that issue per se.
But there are vendors out there that would conduct a patent search for you.
How do you feel when someone comes to you and says, I want to raise $400,000, and you're saying, oh, well, tell me, what are you going to spend the money on? Well, I have this product, and much of it is going to go towards the patent to protect it.
Okay, I follow the Guy Kawasaki pricing of patents. Okay, for every patent you have, we subtract $50,000 from your valuation. Because we view patents as a negative 50,000. Okay?
Okay.
Unless it's a keystone patent that'll keep people from your area. Otherwise, we don't view that as much value.
Thank you for coming out tonight. And if you want to, and you have an offline question or two, and exchange business cards among each other and with our panelists.